I've gone ahead and opened up the spacestation.blend Blender project file, and I have a great little scene here that comes from NASA of the International Space Station. And we're going to learn how to use our viewport navigation controls to navigate and orient ourselves inside this really cool and fun three-dimensional scene. Now, before we get started, I want to point out some hardware requirements for working inside of Blender. You're really going to need two things specifically to work with Blender and to make it the most kind of fun experience, if you will. The first and foremost, you're going to need a 3-button mouse. A traditional 3-button mouse is super important, as many of the viewport navigation controls are linked to that third button. Now, if you're working on a laptop and you only have access to a trackpad or maybe even a traditional 2-button mouse, it's going to work. We can change the Blender preferences to make it a little bit more fast, but really, the entire Blender interface is centered around a 3-button mouse. So you're going to want to get one. In addition, you're also going to need to get access to a traditional full-size keyboard that has a number pad. And the number pad is linked to some really important keyboard shortcuts that'll make it fast and easy to orient and navigate around our three-dimensional scene. It's not a deal breaker if you don't have it, but it is going to make it a whole lot faster, and the experience is going to be a lot better. So I really suggest you get a keyboard with a number pad and a 3-button mouse. With that said, let's jump back over into the software and get to work, and we'll start exploring how we can use the keyboard and mouse combinations to orient and navigate around our three-dimensional scene. So I've chosen this project file specifically because it does a great job of communicating a fun, high-level idea of how we're moving around in the scene. Imagine for a minute that we are an astronaut in space. We've undocked and we've gone outside of the International Space Station, and we're cruising around on one of those cool little jetpacks that our astronauts have. And FYI, if you weren't aware of this, yes, they actually have cool little jetpacks that allow them to kind of float around and navigate the exterior of our space stations. It's very cool. So the larger point here is that we are outside the space station. Our three-dimensional scene is like our three-dimensional universe. The space station is stationary, and I know, it's not actually stationary. I know that it's orbiting Earth at like 90,000 miles an hour. I get that. But for the context of this illustration, it's stationary. So we, the astronaut, are floating around the outside of the space station. The space station isn't moving. Us, the astronaut, are changing our location inside of our three-dimensional space. So when I do this, by pressing and holding the middle mouse button, and then dragging with my mouse, I'm changing my physical location inside of this three-dimensional space. The space station isn't moving. I'm moving. It's as if I'm inside my spacesuit looking through the glass helmet at the space station itself. It's not moving. I'm moving. And I'm doing this. This is called an orbit, by the way. I'm orbiting around the space station by by middle mouse button and clicking with the mouse and then dragging its location on my mouse pad. And this is called an orbit. I'm rotating around a central, kind of the center of the screen, if you will. That's called an orbit. Well, what if I wanted to move left and right? I don't want to orbit. I don't want to change the rotation of myself inside of my three-dimensional scene. I just want to move left and right. Well, that's where the keyboard comes in. So once again, that middle mouse is going to be, that middle mouse button is going to be the key here. But this time we're going to add in the shift key. So shift, middle mouse button at the same time. So I'm holding down the shift key while I do the middle mouse button and drag my mouse. This is called a pan, where I'm moving left and right. Of course, naturally, I can also go up and down. So we have the orbit, which is just the middle mouse button and dragging by itself. We add the shift key in here. Once again, shift, middle mouse button. And now I can pan left, right, up and down. The last one is to physically zoom in and zoom out to get closer or move further away from the space station. And there's two ways that we can do that. Since we have a middle mouse button, the scroll wheel on our middle mouse button will allow us to zoom in and zoom out. In addition, we could also add a keyboard modifier into this and get the same function with the middle mouse button. So instead of scrolling with the middle mouse button, I'm going to hold down the control key, the shift key, and then click and drag with my middle mouse button. And I'm dragging up and down to get this action here. So we have 3 different viewport navigation commands inside of Blender. We have the orbit, which is performed by pressing and holding the middle mouse button. We have a pan, which is pressing and holding the middle mouse button, as well as the shift key. And then we have the zoom, which is pressing and holding the middle mouse button with the control and shift keys pressed on the keyboard. And there we go, which is pretty cool. So those are the 3 basic viewport navigation commands that's really going to help us orient ourselves and work and examine different parts of the scene. As an astronaut, this allows me to go in. Maybe I want to look at the details of this solar panel over here. Well, I can zoom in. Excuse me, there we go. I can get right up next to it, and I can examine the contents of this corner right here. As 3D modelers, we're often and almost constantly orbiting around and looking at our project and our models from a number of different views. So we're going to be doing this a lot. Take a few minutes to practice this. Get comfortable with orbiting, panning, and zooming. It's really going to help your speed and efficiency of working with the tools. Now, if you have a trackpad, or if you're working off of a laptop, there's a couple of things in here that you may want to adjust, because when you're working with a trackpad, you only have really the left and kind of the right mouse button, depending on which trackpad model you're working with here. We can change the global Blender preferences to really emulate this 3-button mouse. So let me show you where we can do this. I do this all the time. So we're going to go to the top of the screen, the tippy top of the screen, into the Edit pull-down menu right here. And then we're going to go at the bottom of this menu is the Preferences option. Now, these are our global Blender preferences, and there's some preference in here that are really super important for us to look at. Specifically, I want to go into the Input section of our Blender preferences, and I would encourage you to explore all of this, but the Input section and the Navigation section are the 2 that we want to look at specifically. First and foremost, let's start with the keyboard. We can emulate the number pad, which is going to transform the top row of our keys to act as the number pads. This is really great if you're working off a laptop. If you have a traditional number pad on your keyboard, you just leave this off. That way, the numbers, the top row numbers on your keyboard will perform a different function. If you're working on a laptop, you may want to emulate a 3-button mouse. And this is going to change the keyboard shortcuts, if you will. This is what I use. I like using the emulate 3-button mouse. Let me show you how this works now. Okay, I'm going to close out my Blender preferences. And with the emulate 3-button mouse turned on, let's notice the differences. Now when I do the middle mouse button, it still works, but with a trackpad, that left mouse button becomes the primary driver of our viewport navigation. Now, if I hold down the Option key and left mouse button and drag, or if you're on a PC, this would be the Alt key. Alt left mouse button does the orbit. Alt Shift does the pan, and Alt Control is going to be the zoom in and zoom out. So the Blender preferences can be changed to really kind of support working off of a laptop, something that you should look at. In addition, let's go back into our global Blender preferences one more time. And I want you to notice under the navigation section here, we have some options, and I want you to draw focus to these zoom method and zoom kind of axis. Right now, if I move my mouse up and down, I'm going to move in and out, which is pretty cool. Some folks like to change this to horizontal. That way, when they move left and right with their mouse, you're going to zoom in and out. Point being is you have options. You can customize your controls to get how you like it. In addition, this is something that I like to just kind of refresh on. In the key map section here, you may want to look at this, because now we can change how the function of our mouse is going to work when selecting objects. More on that here in a minute. The default is left, but some folks like using the right mouse button to select the objects inside the scene. You can change that. In addition, you can also change your space bar to do a couple different things. Right now, if I was to hit the space bar on my keyboard, it's going to play the animation, which is not necessarily what I want. I want to focus my entire kind of configuration on the modeling workflow. I'm going to change my spacebar action to tools. That way I can tap the spacebar with a keyboard shortcut and activate a tool. Very handy. Okay, so these are the 2 that I'm going to pay attention to. I like mine on left for mouse button, but I also like it to be tools on spacebar action. Take a moment and look at the customization of all of your Blender preferences for the input, navigation, and key map. You can never break it. There's always the defaults. If you go down to the bottom of our Blender preferences window, right here, this little button allows you to load the factory settings. So if you kind of mess up or you've gotten down a rabbit hole and you've made so many changes that you're just, I don't know what's going on, you can always go back to the default factory settings right here inside of your global Blender preferences. It's a pretty neat environment. So that's how we're going to be navigating inside of our three-dimensional scene in Blender. We can use any number of keyboard shortcuts to orbit. We can pan, and of course we can zoom in and zoom out as well. So those are the three primary viewport navigation tools that we're going to be using to explore the details of all of our three-dimensional scenes.